Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real-Time Analytics Summit 2022. Data, as we know, is fundamentally changing every industry. It's changing the way we think, the way we operate, and most importantly, the way we make decisions. Today, every company is a data company and are producing massive amount of data. But did you know less than 1% of the data that is getting generated is actually analyzed? In today's talk, I'm going to explain why data is exploding, how companies can ride this data wave, and why real-time analytics is the key to stay on top of this wave. In the late 90s, there were only a few companies that had more than a terabyte of data. At that time, it felt 1 terabyte was a huge number. Today, it's hard to find any company that has less than a terabyte of data. And every company is talking in terms of petabytes, exabytes, and zettabytes. Saying that data is exploding is an understatement. Let's actually look at some numbers to get the magnitude of this explosion. Today, we are generating almost 5,000 petabytes of data every 40 minutes. And if we go back in 2010, it used to take 2 days to generate this amount of data. And if you go further back, it took almost until 2003 for us to generate this amount of data. Of the 7 billion people on Earth, almost 60% of them are online. And each one of us is generating almost close to 2 megabytes of data per second. Our phones are actually capturing our location every 2 seconds. And if you look at this growth chart, by 2025, there will be 175 million petabytes of data. And by 2035, there will be almost close to 2 billion petabytes of data. Most of the cloud providers will probably run out of space to even store this data by then. So the question for us is, how do you capitalize on this data? But before we get into that, let's actually first understand why is this data getting generated. This is very important for us to understand because it not only helps us understand why we got here, but it also helps us understand how to be better prepared for the future. And not only that, it allows us to have the ability to capitalize on this massive opportunity. Let's look at where this data is getting generated in the first place. It all started with the internet. Initially, we had to log into a computer and we had to interact with a website, and that's when the data gets generated. But now we have our mobile phones always with us, and the data is getting generated on a continuous basis. We are getting our status updates of what is happening in the world automatically through our mobile devices. Eventually, we will see that we are generating data without even having an interaction with any device. Our smartwatch is actually generating data as we speak. It's tracking all our health metrics and sending it over to the cloud. Every page we visit on the internet today is probably generating hundreds and hundreds of events. And all these things are just the beginning. And it's also important to note that it's not just the number of devices that are resulting in this change, but it's also the fact that all of them are interconnected. And very soon, we will see all the IoTs or all the devices that we interact with, like the fridge or the washing machine or the dryers, they all will start emitting data. In short, pretty much everything today is generating data on a continuous basis. Let's switch gears and then look at data consumers. What's more interesting and probably the most important thing to understand is what's happening with the data consumers. Because the devices that we are interacting with, they're not just producing data. In fact, they're altering our expectations and our behavior. The smartphones that we have are completely changed our expectations. Earlier, we would have to log on to a computer and check a website to see the status change of something or of an order that we have placed. Today, the mobile phone is letting you know the update in almost real time. And this is the way the new world will work. Pretty much the expectation is that everything should be pushed to you instead of you having to log on a website and then having to pull the status update. And with this, we expect our digital life to happen in almost real time. I would like to categorize these expectations into 3 pillars: fresh, fast, and easy. This is becoming increasingly crucial for every company to be successful. Let's get into each of them and see why these attributes are very important for modern day consumers. It's also important to note that none of these requirements are completely new. They existed before, but were limited to a certain set of industries, such as trading, for example. A trading industry couldn't have survived if the stock price that you're watching is actually few minutes late. Or if you make an API to get the latest price of a stock, took more than 10 seconds to respond. Or if buying is not as simple as clicking on a simple button and then expecting the transaction to be completed in a few milliseconds. What's happening now is that these requirements that were limited to certain industries are now becoming a must-have for other industries. Let's look at the first bucket, the data freshness. Let's look at this graph of data value over time. I would like to think of data value as very similar to the radioactive materials, where after 7 half-life, only 1% of the value remains. Let's take an example of a food delivery app. Let's say you search for pizza on that app. The value of that event is the highest when it happens. If you can act on it immediately by sending coupons or letting him know about the nearby restaurants, that's when you get the maximum value of that event. Knowing about that event the next day is probably too late. You can't really act on that. It's not just about the single event. Even the aggregate events matter. For example, the restaurant owner can look at how long it's taking for him to serve the order, because on the other side, a eater is making decisions on which restaurant to pick based on the wait time. So these things are very, very important for us to know as soon as it happens, and having the ability to act on it immediately can make a big difference in the business. The second pillar is all about speed. It's about analyzing the data at speed of thought. Decision making is very, very important, but it's also an iterative process. It's not just asking a question, you get a result, and then you make a decision. It's about asking a question, you get the results, you analyze the results, you ask more questions, and you keep doing this until you arrive at your decision. So it's important for each of these steps to be as fast as possible. If each of these steps takes seconds or minutes or even hours, then no one is actually going through this process in real time. Let's take the example of food delivery app again. If you want to pick your best restaurant, you want to know how long it takes to serve the order immediately. You are not going to pick up your phone and call each and every restaurant and ask them how long it's taking. You want the app to answer that immediately. Now, even if you zoom out another level, you want to even select which app you want to use to order your food. Let's say one of the app is providing you all this information instantaneously, and the other app is taking seconds or minutes to answer this, or even not even providing this information. We all know which app is you're going to use to make your next food purchase. So the world is moving from taking seconds and minutes to answer a query to milliseconds. And not only that, the number of people who are asking these questions are also increasing from a single user to multiple and many millions of users asking the same question simultaneously. The last part is making it easy to take action. This part is actually very, very important, but also the easiest one to disregard. We often see this with a lot of tools that we use in our daily life. You have these dashboards or reports where you're getting all these insights from. But now you take those insights, you go to another tool to take actions. This is very cumbersome and requires a lot of context to use the tools in the right way. And especially in today's world where we have hundreds and hundreds of dashboards, and each of this dashboard filled with a lot of beautiful widgets, but it's only the person who created the dashboard can actually make sense of it. It's important for us to make sure that the data consumers have one tool to not only consume the insights, but also provide an easy way to act on those insights within the same context. Meeting these new expectations of our data consumers, being fast, fresh, and easy, is hard. But you know what? To make it worse, the number of consumers are also increasing. They are not only growing in numbers, but they're exploding. Every data producer is now becoming a consumer. And analytics is no longer limited to the internal employees of an organization. It's extending beyond that. A Uber rider, a driver, a restaurant owner, all of them are becoming data consumers. Not only that, in future, you will start seeing every machine, every IoT device out there is actually going to consume this data and act on it immediately. In short, everyone is a decision maker. And to make decisions, they need data. And they need it fast, and they want it now, and it should be easy to access the data. Unfortunately, the data systems we have today were not built to meet the expectations of modern day consumers. Many companies are struggling to break away from the legacy infrastructure that they have today. For a long time, companies thought technology as a means to an end, but today that's changing. It's the technology that's enabling them to create differentiation and also leapfrog their competition. Let's see why the existing infrastructure is unable to meet the needs of modern day consumers. To understand why this is so hard, let's look at the journey of data, how the data moves from producer to consumer. First, you need a system to collect the event. This is typically done in a database, and this layer has undergone massive transformation in the last 2 decades, starting from a single node RDBMS to distributed NoSQL databases and back to distributed SQL databases, and in fact, the transactions spanning multiple data centers. The data from these systems are then transferred to data lake such as S3, Hadoop, and so on. After this, they undergo transformation process using ETL tools like Spark, Hadoop, and so on. And finally, they're shipped to data warehouse. Now, the data consumers are able to access this data from data warehouse using dashboards or SQL editors. This might look complex, but this is a very, very simplified view. Trust me, the real pipeline, if I have to show this on the slide, probably won't even fit on this slide. There are cases in the wild where this pipeline can even take entire day to process the day's worth of data. Why is this a problem? Let's go back to our data value over time graph. If you look at this graph, every step here is adding to the delay. It's taking a lot longer for the consumer to act on this data or act on an event as soon as it happens. Most of the time, by the time it reaches the consumer, 90% of the value is already lost. And this is very, very important for us to make sure that the time from the event to insights is as short as possible so that the consumer can act on an event as soon as possible. So the real challenge here is every system in this pipeline was built for a different era where getting insights after a day was completely fine. Going from days to seconds, it's not as simple as taking the same batch pipeline and then running it more frequently. In fact, a lot of companies have tried doing this, where they try to take the batch pipeline and try to run it every hour, every 5 minutes. My only suggestion, don't do it. You are simply delaying the inevitable. And in fact, sometimes moving from batch to real-time architecture is actually a lot simpler than trying to force-fit the requirements of the modern day requirements on a batch stack. Let's look at how each of these layers are actually transforming. On the collection layer, the database is no longer able to keep up with the amount of events that we are generating. That's where we see the rise of modern day event stores like Kafka, Kinesis, PubSub, and so on. These systems are able to ingest millions and millions of events per second. On the ETL layer or the processing layer, we are moving from batch ETL systems, which we are able to only process a batch of data, to streaming ETL tools, which can process the events as and when they occur. This is where we see new systems like Flink, Spark Streaming, K-Streams, and so on. These two systems are very well adopted already in a lot of companies. But let's look at what happens after that. Many companies take this data from these high throughput systems and then simply put it on S3 or other data warehouses. By taking the data from these systems and moving into data lakes like S3 or even data warehouse means that a lot of value is lost. This is where real-time databases like Apache Pino come into picture. These databases allow you to simply point at the stream and start querying them in real time. The next part that's important is how do consumers interact with this data? This is where the world is also moving from the traditional dashboards and reports to more data apps. As I mentioned earlier, it's important for the consumers to not only get insights on an app, but also be able to act on that within the same context. Let's look at what this architecture means to the value of data over time. As you can see in this graph, with the real-time stack, you are able to capture the value of every event that happens within your system. and as soon as it happens. Whereas with the batch stack, you probably almost lost more than 90% of the value of the data. One of the common myths here is people look at the cost of a real-time stack and a batch stack. And I was guilty of doing that as well when I was at LinkedIn. But the right way to look at this is the value that you're able to capture with the real-time stack versus a batch stack. Before we built Apache Pino at LinkedIn, we actually used a search engine, and that needed almost 1,000 nodes to serve who viewed my profile use case. And I even questioned the need for real time by purely looking at the cost of infrastructure. But I failed to see the value the business was able to capture by providing real time insights to LinkedIn members. This is exactly what motivated us to build Apache Pino at LinkedIn. In fact, once we built this, we saw almost 50x improvement in the infrastructure cost. The key takeaway here is to understand the value real-time insights bring to the data consumers. Because once you see that value, there is no going back. Let's look at what it means moving from a data warehouse to a real-time databases. It's important to understand these three dimensions: freshness, latency, and concurrency. With real-time databases, you can ingest data in real time, answer queries in milliseconds, and serve hundreds and millions of members. One might ask, why is speed important? Again, this goes back to the changing expectations of data consumers. Earlier in 2000s, Google actually did an experimentation where they changed the number of results within a page from 10 to 30. And they saw that the traffic and the revenue declined by 20%. It's not just the Google search results, but studies have shown that 40% of the shoppers abandon a cart if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. Customers often become frustrated if they expect the technology to be instant and then they experience delays. The key takeaway here is latency is becoming a very important dimension to meet the expectations of the modern day consumers. Let's look at the last but the most important thing is also the way people are consuming this data. As we make changes to these infrastructure layers, it's also important to consider the way data consumers are consuming this data. As I mentioned before, dashboards are overwhelming for most of the consumers today. There are a lot of different tools. There is one tool to get the insight, and there is another tool to act on that insight. There is a lot of information overload. As a result, only few people are able to act on these insights. The right way to provide these insights to the users is through data apps. These are live, they are contextual, and pretty much everyone can actually use this. Compare and contrast a dashboard with the tools that you see, like Who Viewed My Profile or an Uber Eats app and things like that, where you are provided not only with the insights, but the ability to act on those insights within the same app. And this is how the world is going to interact with data going forward. I know by now most of you might be thinking, hey, these problems are so hard to solve. How do you find a solution for this? Well, I have some good news that there is already a solution for these problems. And not only that, it's also proven at scale. Apache Pino is a real-time OLAP database, purpose-built to address the requirements of user-facing analytics. It was built at LinkedIn to address the challenges of ingesting millions of events per second in real time, allowing millions of users to query them simultaneously and be able to get the response in milliseconds. Pino is able to achieve this incredible scale because of its powerful indexes. These powerful indexes reduces the work done per query by orders of magnitude compared to other databases out there. At LinkedIn, hundreds of applications are powered by Pino, and they are serving 200,000 queries per second while ingesting million plus events. At Stripe, every transaction since day one is being ingested into Pino, and the operators are able to query this massive petabyte scale database and expect latency in sub-seconds. Uber uses Pino to power a lot of their internal and external use cases. The most important property of Pino is that it reduces the cost per query by orders of magnitude. And this is very important when you want to capitalize on the data that you're already collecting, because this allows you to build apps that you wouldn't have built with other systems. Let's take a quick look at how Pino has transformed the architecture at Stripe. Before Pino, Stripe had multiple systems to solve the same use case. Every transaction was coming into a Postgres database and also to S3. One of them was used for lookups, the other one was being used for analyzing the data. The problem with this was, first, there were multiple systems to manage and operate. Second, the freshness was in hours, not in seconds that they really wanted. Last but not the least, each query would take multiple minutes to run. Contrast that with the architecture on the right after they got in Pino. They had just one system to pretty much serve both their lookup queries as well as the analytical queries. Not only that, they were able to achieve millisecond response times, and the freshness was in order of seconds. So this is the kind of architecture change that Pino can bring into any company. And as I mentioned before, this is very, very important to meet the needs of the modern day consumers. The adoption of Pino has grown a lot in the last 2 years with companies like Citibank, 7-Eleven, Walmart, Target, and many more. Pino has enabled these companies to achieve things that they were not able to achieve with the existing technologies. If you're interested in trying out Pino, I'm super thrilled to announce that we have a self-serve version of StarTree Cloud. You can sign up for a 30-day free trial. StarTree Cloud allows you to go very quickly from events to insights in real time. It comes with a lot of additional features, such as Data Manager to allow you to ingest data into Pino without writing a single line of code. It even has other features like tiered storage that lets you use S3 as the backend for Pino. Not only that, it also comes with inbuilt apps such as Third Eye, which can allow you to do real-time anomaly detection and root cause analysis on the data that you have ingested. Give it a try to experience the power of Pino. To conclude, I want to reiterate that a lot of innovators are already able to get the full value of data that they are collecting. If you are still in the batch paradigm and looking for ways to make the jump from batch to real time, we are here to help you on your journey. Thank you all for attending the talk and enjoy the rest of the summit.